In the 2023 draft, the Los Angeles Rams selected Desjuan Johnson, making Johnson Mr. Irrelevant for this particular draft. Very often there's an uphill battle for these guys that get picked so late in the draft, but for some people they actually make it work. It got me thinking, what has happened to the last 10 Mr. Irrelevants in the NFL? If you wanted to know what the origins of Mr. Irrelevant were, it began in 1976 Colts wide receiver Paul Solata. It was a way of honoring the last pick in the draft because to him, it was irrelevant if you were picked first or last. Mr. Irrelevant would get honored with a week-long extravaganza in Newport Beach, California for being the last pick. So it got me thinking of what was the outcome of the last 10 Mr. Irrelevants. So we'll start from back in 2013 where tight end Justice Cunningham was picked up by the Indianapolis Colts. Just days before week 1, he was placed on their practice squad but was promoted for a week 12 game against the Cardinals where he actually caught a pass for 4 yards. He was then waived a few days later and signed to the Rams practice squad. And this went on with the Rams for the next few years, going to the practice squad, being moved up or being active for games and then reverting back to practice squad. He was waived for the final time right before week 1 of the 2016 season, thus ending his tenure in the NFL. Cunningham finished with 4 games being played and 1 reception with 4 yards. Moving on to the 2014 season, we have safety Lonnie Ballantyne. In 2015, he had 3 tackles and 1 pass deflected. In 2016, he was placed on the physically unable to perform list to start the season, but was active by week 7. Unfortunately, he was placed on IR a day before a week 10 matchup against the Jaguars. He was placed on IR for a final time and ultimately released just days before the week 1 start of the 2017 season. His final stats were those 3 tackles and 1 pass deflection, and he played in 4 games total. Moving on to the 2015 draft, we have tight end Gerald Christian. Unfortunately for Christian, he tore his MCL in the final preseason game of his rookie year and he was placed on IR. Christian was released by the Cardinals just before the 2016 season opener. He was later picked up by the Bills, who had him on and off their practice squad. He was active in 3 games and even had a reception for 14 yards, but was released the following offseason. He was signed by the Cardinals 1 more time, but was waived by the end of training camp. The only other notable thing I found about Gerald Christian is that he does have a brother in the NFL who's actually doing pretty okay. His name's Jerron Christian. He's still in the league and was drafted in 2018. Gerald's final stats, however, were that he played in 3 games, ultimately only having 1 reception for 14 yards. Up next in 2016, we have Kaylan Reed, drafted by the Titans. He was placed on the practice squad following final roster cuts. Reed was promoted and activated though for his final 4 games, totaling 3 tackles. He played in 3 games the following year in 2017, but only recorded 1 pass deflection statistic. He was placed on IR the following year due to a broken foot and was ultimately released in 2018. He did sign to the Seahawks practice squad and was promoted for a time in week 10, but did not play. Unfortunately, Reed suffered a career-ending neck injury in 2019, and he was told he would be at serious risk if he ever played again. Up next is a pretty interesting one. In 2017, the Denver Broncos used the Mr. Irrelevant pick for Chad Kelly. Chad Kelly is the younger brother of Hall of Famer Jim Kelly. He was actually a talented quarterback, but he had several off-the-field issues. Nonetheless, he was still a 4-star recruit when he committed to Clemson, but ultimately was dismissed due to more off-the-field issues and conduct detrimental to the team. After a year in community college, he transferred to Ole Miss, where he defeated the likes of Alabama, Auburn, and LSU. Unfortunately, during his senior year, he tore his ACL. Despite the obvious talent that Kelly had, he was relegated to the Mr. Irrelevant pick due to on-the-field injuries and off-the-field issues. Things did not go in Kelly's favor in his rookie year. He injured his wrist, ultimately landing on IR for his entire 2017 campaign. The following year in 2018, he competed for the backup job versus Paxton Lynch, and sure enough, he won the job. However, more off-the-field antics cost Kelly his job with the Broncos as he was arrested for criminal trespassing in October of 2018. It wasn't until the 2019 season that someone picked him up, that being the Indianapolis Colts, but he did not play at all in the 2019 season. In week 3 of the 2020 season, Chad Kelly was ultimately released. He was last seen in 2022 playing backup quarterback in the CFL for the Toronto Argonauts. His final stats were just 1 game played where he had 1 rush for -1 yard. So from Chad Kelly and up, I've noticed that there was a pickup in Mr. Irrelevant efficiency. We begin here with 2018's Mr. Irrelevant, Trey Quinn. Quinn was selected by Washington, and even though he did suffer a high ankle injury in week 1 and was placed on IR, he was activated in time for week 11. He played in 3 games before re-injuring his ankle. The following year in 2019, he appeared in 12 games and even started in 6 of them, compiling 26 receptions for just under 200 yards and a touchdown. Unfortunately, he could not finish the season due to a concussion suffered against the Panthers in week 13. Quinn was waived before the start of the 2020 season, and over the following 2 years, he was signed by the likes of the Jaguars, the Raiders, and the Broncos, appearing in a total of just 1 game during that span. Trey Quinn today is in the USFL as he is a wide receiver for the Michigan Panthers. His final stats with the NFL though were 16 games played, 35 receptions, 273 yards, and 2 touchdowns. In 2019, the Arizona Cardinals used the Mr. Irrelevant pick with tight end Caleb Wilson. Immediately, Wilson was placed on the practice squad, and he would not be picked up by any team until Washington came knocking around week 15. In 2020, he was signed by the Eagles and was active for 5 games, but unfortunately recorded no stats. He did have stints with Washington again and the Broncos, but never played a snap. Now, although Wilson hasn't officially retired, things are looking bleak in this tight end's career as he can't seem to catch on nor really get involved when he's actually activated. In 2020, the New York Giants selected Tay Crowder. In his rookie year, he played 11 games and started 6 of them. In those 11 games, he had a sack and a fumble recovery for a touchdown. In 2021, he actually became a full-time starter, playing all 17 games for Big Blue. He recorded 2 interceptions, a forced fumble, and a team-leading 130 tackles. He began the 2022 season as the starter, but up until week 10, he was benched and ultimately waived after week 15 due to poor performance. Crowder was signed by the Steelers for the final 2 games on the season, and he is still with Pittsburgh to this day. Before we get to 2022, we have the 2021 Mr. Irrelevant pick, Grant Stewart. Selected by the Buccaneers, Stewart actually appeared in all 17 games, totaling 15 tackles and forced a fumble. He was traded to the Colts before the start of the 2022 season, and with the Colts he appeared in 15 games, compiling another 11 tackles, and to this day he's still with the Colts. You actually may know Stewart from his Uber Eats commercial where they poke fun of him for being Mr. Irrelevant.
If you don't recognize me, it's because I'm Mr. Irrelevant, but I'm gonna put in the work every single day, so soon everybody will know the name of the legendary Grant.
And finally, ladies and gentlemen, for the 2022 Mr. Irrelevant pick, the San Francisco 49ers selected Brock Purdy. Honestly, Purdy's story began before the season even started. He made the final roster as a 3rd string. Just keep in mind, it's not very common for teams these days to keep 3 quarterbacks, but Purdy showed enough to warrant a roster spot despite being a 3rd stringer. The fact that he beat out a veteran in Nate Sudfeld speaks volumes as to where the coaching staff viewed Purdy at that point. Trey Lance does get hurt in week 2, thus putting Brock Purdy in the quarterback 2 position. When Garoppolo was hurt in a week 13 game against the Dolphins, it seemed all hope was lost, but Purdy carried on and actually went on to defeat the Dolphins in a very flashy fashion. Purdy was named the starter for the rest of the year and was arguably playing as the best quarterback for the Niners that entire year. That includes what we saw from Garoppolo and Lance. He never lost a game until the NFC Championship, where, well, to be fair, he was hurt very early on. If you include the playoffs, he still had a 7-1 record where he threw 13 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions and compiled just under 1,400 yards in the air. He has an argument to remain the starter for the future, and that's very impressive when you remember what the Niners gave up for the likes of Trey Lance. Unfortunately for Brock Purdy, that elbow injury was a significant one. Despite this, and despite the fact that he only has 1 year under his belt, Brock Purdy might be the best Mr. Irrelevant of all time. So there you guys have it. As far as Desjuan Johnson goes, you can definitely work with what you got here. Even though you're selected as the final pick of the draft, just remember what the words of Paul Solata were. Whether you got picked first or last, the fact that you were selected at all means you were talented enough to at the very least give yourself a chance in the highest level of this game possible. If you like this sort of content, please like and subscribe. We're on the road to 1,500 subs. Thank you guys for the support. I appreciate you guys, and follow me on TikTok. I do post some football content there as well. Until next time, y'all. Shaboy!